Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This lecture is about Reynolds Nicholson's The Path, taken from the Mystics of Islam. If you take a look at your course contents, you know this is the name of your paper, 20th Century Fiction and Non-Fiction, and it is included in semester number 8 of Abdul Wali Khan University. And this paper has two parts. The first part is the fictional part, and the other is the non-fictional part. In this B non-fictional part, we have already discussed Joseph Campbell's Byzantium, which was taken from the book Occidental Mythology. And this is the second writer, Reynolds and Nicholson, who wrote a book, The Mystics of Islam. This one. This is the book written by Reynolds and Nicholson. And this thing, this topic, the path, is taken from the same book. If you go and scroll down and go to the contents, you find out that there are 6 chapters in this book. The first is named as The Path, and this is included in your course, and this lecture is about this one. The second is the Illumination and Ecstasy. The third, the Gnosis. The fourth, Divine Love. And then you have the fifth, Saints and Miracles, and the unitive state. So you can see there are 6 chapters in this book, and the first chapter is included in your course, and the name of the book is The Mystics of Islam. So you now know this topic, at least, that the topic or the article, or you can say chapter number 1, uh, named as The Path, is taken from the book The Mystics of Islam, this one, written by Reynolds and Nicholson, a very famous writer and a great scholar. By Wikipedia, he is referred to as the scholar of Islamic literature and the scholar of Islamic mysticism. He has written many books. Uh, Most of the books are translations, and there are also commentaries on it. He has translated Maulana Rum Sahib Masnavi, and he has translated also Hazrat Data Ganj Bakhsh's book, and he has various books, Kashaf al Mahjub, and there are so many other books which he had translated. He has written this book, The Mystics of Islam, and this book is based on the 7 stages taken from this book called Al-Luma fi Tasawwuf. This Al-Luma is, this Ain is, it cannot be translated or it cannot be um, pronounced by the English writers. So therefore they say Al-Luma, ignoring this Ain, which is Al-Luma, actually written by Abu Nasr Sarraj Tusi. So this book is mainly based on this one, written by Abu Nasr Sarraj Tusi. As I said, Reynolds A. Nicholson, this A stands for Alan, Reynolds Allen Nicholson. He was a great scholar, and whatever he has written is very authentic for us, for Muslims as well. But you know that mysticism is a very complicated subject, Islamic mysticism, and he was not a practicing Sufi himself. Of course, he was not Muslim, he was an English writer. Therefore, there are some of the mistakes, and our Sufis, the well educated Sufis, educated in Western knowledge, they have pointed out those mistakes. However, 95% of what he has written is okay, and there's nothing wrong. He is very honest in translating. However, the misunderstanding of his and the mistakes committed by him just 5% of them. They are, of course, not intentional and not out of dishonesty, but he has misunderstood it. And of course, as I said, he's not a Muslim, but he was a great scholar of Persian. He was also a professor of Persian, and he used to teach Persian language. He used to know many languages: Turkish language, Persian language, Arabic language, even Punjabi language. And he has translated books from all these languages related with the Islamic literature, especially related with Islamic mysticism. His work has been followed by our scholars, Muslim scholars as well. He's such a great writer. So this much for this writer's introduction. We now come to the path. As I said, this is the first chapter of this book, The Mystics of Islam, by Reynolds A. Nicholson. And this book has, as I said, six chapters. The path is the first one. And this is the one which we are discussing today. In this chapter or in this book, he talks about the mystics of Islam, and he talks about how they practiced their mysticism, the Sufis, how they practiced their tasawwuf, what is like, what were the stages they had to pass through it, and how did they do it. So whatever they did is described, and he is very honest to his books. He is very honest to his translation. Whatever he has written is honestly written. Uh, at least in this book, there aren't any mistakes, and there are, in some cases, in very minute cases, there are mistakes, and those mistakes have been corrected by our practicing Sufis and scholars. So, in this first chapter, the path written by this, of course, it is based on, as I said, this book named is Al-Luma with Tasawwuf. It is based on this, but of course, it is in translation. He has written it in his own language. In this chapter, he describes the progress of the spiritual life. And you know, the progress of the spiritual life is always compared with a journey or sometimes with a pilgrimage. So, if you are talking about journey, you have to talk about the traveler, you have to talk about the path which is followed by this traveler when he is journeying, and there are different stages through which this person, the traveler, has to pass. So you see, the analogy of the Sufi is based on the journey. This journey is the spiritual journey, and the Sufi who is traveling, of course, in English he is called traveler, but in Sufi language he is called Salik. So the traveler is the Salik. The stages through which he passes during this journey are referred to as maqamat in Persian as well as in Arabic, and this path itself is called tariqat. So whether you say tasawwuf or tariqa, it's the same. Tariqa is translated in Arabic and Persian as the path. So this is that path. And what is the goal and the purpose of this journey? That is the union with reality, the union with God, the union with Allah Ta'ala, and this is terminologically, Sufi terminology, it is referred to as Fana fil Haq or Fana fillah, which is the main goal of the Sufi. So you can now see the analogy. The Sufi who is traveling this path of Sufism is referred to as traveler or Salik. The stages through which he passes are Muqamat, and the path itself is referred to as Tariqa, and the goal he wants to achieve is the Fana fillah, the Fana fil Haq. That is the union with the One, the union with reality, the union with God, the union with Allah Ta'ala. Now, this fact also remains intact, that if you are a Salik and you have reached your final goal, and you want to tell about your journey to the other people, and you map it. You map your ascent to Allah Ta'ala, then your map will be different from the maps the others will have to make, because everybody's experiences are different from the other saliks, from the other travelers. So therefore, everybody's experiences are different. Their tariqah, their suluk, their path is the same, but the stages through which they passes are different. That map would be different. This path has been described in many books. Six of them are very important. One of those six is Kitab al-Luma. As I said, this book, Kitab al-Luma, is referring to this book, and Nicholson, this great scholar, has translated and has written commentary on this book, Al-Luma fit Tasawwuf. And this book, which we are studying the path, is actually based on the stages described in Kitab al-Luma by Tusi. And he describes 7 stages. We will discuss these 7 stages, and this is the topic, the actual topic of this lecture. We will find out here the first stage, the repentance, called Toba, the abstinence, you abstain yourself from sins, the renunciation, also called Zuhud or Taqwa, and poverty, also called Faqr, patience, called Sabr, and trust in God, called Tawakkul. These are the different stages the Sufi has to pass through them with ethical discipline, and once he has covered all these paths, he will attain his higher planes of consciousness, his higher station, and that higher station is called Marifat in Arabic and Persian, and it is called Gnosis in English. The truth which he achieves, that is Allah Ta'ala, that is called the truth or the Haqiqat, and the seeker, the Salik, also called the Talib, the one who seeks is called Talib, is that person. This Talib becomes the knower, that is the Gnostic, also called Arif. So this process is called Marifat, and the one who has got this Marifat, the seeker, now becomes the knower. He is called Arif. This uh, portion, the path, is actually the first portion of a threefold journey. A threefold journey means the path, the gnosis, and the truth. So out of these three, we are discussing the path and the different stages the Sufi has to pass through while traveling on that path. अब इसको ज़रा उर्दू में भी सुन लें. ये आसान है क्योंकि ये जिन चीज़ों की बातें कर रहा है वो अंग्रेज़ों से ज़्यादा हम जानते हैं, हम इनको डिस्कस करते हैं. और राइटर का नाम है R.A. निकलसन या रेनल्ड्स एंड निकलसन, और ये एक बड़ा आलिम हम मुसलमान तो ज़ाहिर नहीं है, लेकिन ये बड़ा स्कॉलर रहा है पर्शियन लैंग्वेज का. ये शख्स है, आप इसको तस्वीर में देख सकते हैं. विकिपीडिया ने इसको इस्लामिक लिटरेचर और इस्लामिक मिस्टिसिज्म का स्कॉलर कहा है. इसने बड़ी दयानतदारी के साथ ट्रांसलेशंस की हैं तसव्वुफ़ की किताबों की, लेकिन न जानते हुए कुछ गलतियां भी इससे हुई हैं जो कि बहुत कम है. आप समझे 90%, 95% वो ठीक है, और कुछ जो गलतियां हुई हैं वो बददियानती की बुनियाद पे नहीं है, बल्कि चूंकि ये प्रैक्टिसिंग मुस्लिम तो नहीं था और ना ये सूफी था. जो प्रैक्टिस करते हैं उन्होंने जब इसकी ट्रांसलेशन देखी तो उसमें कुछ गलतियां निकली हैं, लेकिन उन्होंने भी इसकी तहकीक को फॉलो किया है. एंड दिस इज़ द ऑनर वी गिव टू दिस पर्सन, क्योंकि इसने बहुत ज़्यादा मेहनत की है. अरबिक भी जानता था, पर्शियन का प्रोफेसर रहा है, और ऑक्सफोर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी में मुख्तलिफ जगहों पे इसने पढ़ाया है. ये ट्रांसलेशंस की हैं, और प्रोफेसर रहा है पर्शियन लैंग्वेज का। इसने मौलाना रूम साहब की मस्कनी को ट्रांसलेट किया है। हज़रत दादा गंज बख्श रहमतुल्लाह अलैह की कशफुल माजूद को भी ट्रांसलेट किया है। अल्लामा इकबाल को भी ट्रांसलेट किया है। पंजाबी लैंग्वेज भी जानता था और सब लैंग्वेजेस से ट्रांसलेशन की है। वंडरफुल गाय। और इसने ये किताब लिखी। इस किताब का नाम है द मिस्टिक्स, और जैसे अभी आपको बताया, और द मिस्टिक्स ऑफ इस्लाम। और इसके 6 चैप्टर्स हैं, जिनमें से पहला चैप्टर आपके कोर्स में शामिल है, द पाथ। सारी किताब हमें बताती है कि एक सूफी किस तरीके से अपनी ज़िंदगी गुजारता है और क्या करता है, कैसे वो आला मकाम तक पहुंचता है। 7 स्टेजेस जिसका बयान इसने किया है वो इस किताब से है। इस किताब को भी इसने ट्रांसलेट किया है और इसका नाम है अल्लुमा फिर तसव्वुफ। ये अबू नसर सराज तुसी की किताब है, और चूंकि अंग्रेज आयन नहीं बोल सकता तो इस अल्लुमा को इसने अल्लुमा लिखा हुआ है। ज़ाहिर है ये इंग्लिश में आयन साउंड नहीं है, वो जानता था क्योंकि उसने तो वो तो प्रोफेसर रहा है पर्शियन का, तो वो तो जानता था। इसने इस किताब की ट्रांसलेशन भी की है। ये जो स्टेजेस हैं इसका जिक्र यहीं से तुसी से लिया है इसने। तो ये जिक्र करता है, और हमें पता है कि जो सूफी बंदा है उसकी उसकी जो उसका जो सफ़र है, रूहानी सफ़र, उसको सफ़र से, जर्नी से तशबीह दी जाती है। जब आप सफ़र कहते हैं तो इसमें फिर सफ़र करने वाला भी होगा, उसको सालिक कहा जाता है। आप उसको सूफी कहें, उसको सालिक कहें, दोनों ठीक है, ट्रैवलर कहलाएगा। ये इस सफ़र के दौरान मुख्तलिफ स्टेजेस से गुजरेगा, ये मुकामात कहलाते हैं। और ये जो रास्ता बज़ाते खुद है ये तरीक़ा या सुलूक कहलाता है। ये बंदा सालिक कहलाता है, इसका ये रास्ता सलूक कहलाता है या तरीक़ा कहलाता है। और इसका जो मकसद है वो रियलिटी अल्लाह ताला के साथ मिलना है, मुलाकात है, एक होना है। और इसको फना फिल हक भी कहते हैं, फना फिल्लाह भी कहते हैं। अगर कोई शख्स जो कि इन स्टेजेस से गुजरा हो और वो मैप करना चाहे तो वो नहीं बता सकेगा, और अगर बता भी सकेगा तो कोई उसको समझेगा नहीं। लेकिन फर्ज करें अगर वो बता भी दे तो वो नक्शा जो बनाएगा या वो चीज़ें जो बताएगा वो दूसरे बंदे के नक्शे से मुख्तलिफ होंगी, क्योंकि मकसद तो पनाह फिल्लाह ही है। लेकिन इसके जो तरीके हैं ये मुख्तलिफ एक्सपीरियंसेस से गुजरते हैं, तो हर एक की अपनी एक्सपीरियंसेस होगी। फिर इसने किताबुल-नुमा का ज़िक्र किया है और बताया है कि इसने वज़ाहत की है इन 7 स्टेजेस की, जिसमें से रिपेंटेंस है, तौबा जिसको कहते हैं, एब्सटेंस, रिनंसिएशन है, को ज़ुहद और तक़वा कहते हैं, फ़ुक़्र है, सब्र है और तवक्कुल है। ये सारी स्टेजेस हैं। बीच में 1-2 चीज़ें एक्स्ट्रा भी आ गई हैं, लेकिन हमारा जो लेक्चर होगा ये मोस्टली इसी के बारे में होगा। और ये जो सूफ़ी है ये जब अपने ज़बरदस्त स्टेजेस पर पहुंचता है तो फिर इसको आरिफ का नाम दिया जाता है। इंग्लिश में इसको नास्टिक कहते हैं, अब इसको नोअर भी कहते हैं। आरिफ से मतलब है कि जानने वाला, और ये जो सीकर है, तलाश करने वाला है, सालिक है, इसको तालिब भी कहते हैं। और जो ट्रूथ ये सीख कर रहा है इसको हकीकत कहते हैं, अल्लाह ताला। और इसको जो चीज़ हासिल होती है अल्लाह ताला की समझ, अल्लाह ताला की पहचान, इसको मारिफत कहते हैं, और इसको इंग्लिश में नासिस कहते हैं। तो ये जो 3 प्रॉन्ग्ड जर्नी है इसकी, द पाथ, द नासिस और द ट्रूथ, जिसका जिक्र यहाँ पे हमने किया, इनमें से ये पहला हम करेंगे और वो है द पाथ। तो इसकी स्टेजेस पे इसने जिक्र किया है, और पहला जो स्टेज है उसको हम पढ़ रहे हैं और वो है repentance. So we talk about repentance now. This is the first stage in the journey of this Sufi, and it is also referred to as Toba. If you pronounce the final T, then it becomes Tobat, but we don't say it as Tobat, we say it as Toba. That T is not pronounced. It is a kind of conversion, because when you perform your Toba, you are converted, all the previous sins of yours are forgiven, and this is actually the beginning of a new life. You start your sins from the beginning, from 1 to 3, because all of the previous sins are forgiven. Toba is also referred to as awakening of the soul from the slumber of heedlessness. When somebody has not performed Toba as if his soul is sleeping, and this sleep is the sleep of carelessness. That is, he is careless in giving attention to his sins. So once he has given attention to it, he is awakened, his soul is awakened. And the sinner, when he performs Tawbah, he becomes aware of the evil he has done, of the evil ways, and he remembers them. However, his Tawbah is not accepted unless he abandons the sin he has performed his Tawbah from, and secondly, that he will not return to those sins. So if these two things are fulfilled, then this man and his tawbah are accepted, and his sins are forgiven. It is said that there was a famous Sufi and that he repented or performed tawbah for 70 times, and every time he failed and he fell back. Um, but on the 71st time, he was successful and he was forgiven and his tawbah was accepted. Um, the other condition is also this one, that if you perform tawbah, then you need to satisfy all those whom you have injured. For example, if you have embezzled money from someone, then you need to give that money back to him. If you have talked against someone in ghibat, then you have to beg his pardon, and you have to all these things if you want your tawbah to be accepted. So this is the first stage. ये पहला स्टेज हम पढ़ रहे हैं एक सूफी और एक सालिक के जर्नी में, और ये पहला स्टेप तौबा का है। इसलिए इसमें ये आखिर में ती लिखा है क्योंकि तौबा के आखिर में ये ते लिखा जाता है, बोला नहीं जाता, हम इसको तौबा कहते हैं। और इसको एक किस्म का इस तब्दीली का है क्योंकि आप तब्दील हो जाते हैं, आपके सारे गुनाह माफ़ हो जाते हैं और आप शुरू से शुरू करते हैं अपनी लाइफ को। और ये एक किस्म की आपकी रूह का जागना है उस ख्वाब से जो बेखबरी का ख्वाब है जिसमें आप अपने गुनाहों से बेखबर हैं। लिहाजा जब आप तौबा करते हैं तो आप अपने सिंस से अवेयर हो जाते हैं, बाखबर हो जाते हैं और फिर वो काम नहीं करते। ताहम तौबा की कबूलियत के कुछ शराइत हैं जिसमें पहला शर्त ये है कि जिस काम से आपने तौबा किया है आप उसको दोबारा नहीं करेंगे, और अम, जो काम जिस सिन से आप इस सिन को आप अबैंडन करेंगे, तर्क करेंगे और इस सिन की तरफ वापस नहीं आएंगे, दोबारा इसको नहीं करेंगे। कहा यह जाता है कि एक बुजुर्ग ने 70 मरतबा तौबा किया, 70 मरतबा वापस हुआ और 71वीं मरतबा पे वो कामयाब हुआ। तो अगर एक तो बस आपका टूट जाता है, आप दूसरा करते हैं और ये अल्लाह ताला को अजीज़ है, वो पसंद करता है आपके तौबा को। ताहम तौबा करने के बाद मसलन आपने किसी का माल खाया है तो आप उसके माल को वापस करेंगे, किसी की ग़ीबत की है तो आप उससे माफ़ी मांगेंगे और उसको कंपनसेट करेंगे। तो ये सारा काम आप करेंगे तो तब आपकी तौबा कबूल होगी, वरना ये तौबा कबूल नहीं होगी। So this was the first stage in the path of a Sufi. The next thing which is important, of course, it is not included in the stages. Rather, it should be the first thing, that if you want to follow a path, then you should take some director, the one who has been through that path, which is referred to as Sheikh or Peer or Murshid Sahib, and you have to take that as a director. This Sheikh is the one who has a very ripe experience, a very profound knowledge, and practical knowledge. This Sheikh must have passed through all these stages and he must have reached the final goal. and in that case he can guide you. He becomes your director, he becomes your sheikh, your peer sahib, your murshid sahib. So his guidance is based on his life experiences and his profound knowledge. But remember, this is the practical knowledge. If we take this Nicholson, his knowledge was a bookish knowledge that wasn't based on practice because he wasn't a practicing Sufi. This Sheikh is always a practicing Sufi, and he's the one who knows the ups and downs of the path. And without the assistance of such a person, it is said that your guide would be Satan. So if you do not have a Sheikh on the spot, then you might be guided by Satan, and that Sadiq is then likened to such a tree who doesn't bear any fruit, or if it does, it bears bitter fruit. So the path is the designation given to this journey, as I said, uh, and it can be studied under different headings, as we have said. Poverty is called faqr, mortification is zuhud and taqwa, trust in God is tawakkul, and recollection is zikr. So द शेख कोई मरहला तो नहीं है, ये ज़रूरी है कि शुरू में ही हो। अगर आप एक कामयाब सूफी बनना चाहते हैं तो आपको एक एक्सपीरियंस डायरेक्टर की ज़रूरत है, जिसको शेख साहब कहते हैं या पीर साहब कहते हैं या मुर्शद साहब कहते हैं। और ये एक प्रैक्टिसिंग सूफी होता है, जिसको हम कहते हैं पूछा हुआ बंदा होता है। ये अपने एक्सपीरियंस और प्रोफाउंड नॉलेज के ज़रिए आपको गाइड करता है। आपकी हालत को देखकर आपकी वो चीज़ें प्रिस्क्राइब करता है, ज़िक्र प्रिस्क्राइब करता है, या जो भी तरीका वो अच्छा समझे। और कहा यह जाता है, मशहूर है, कि जिसका कोई पीर साहिब नहीं होता, शेख साहिब नहीं होता, मुर्शिद साहिब नहीं होता, तो उसका फिर मुर्शिद शैतान होता है। और ऐसे आदमी को एक दरख्त के साथ तशबीह दी जाती है, जिसमें फ्रूट उगे ही नहीं, और अगर उगे तो तल्ख फ्रूट उगे। और इसका जो नाम है, डिजिग्नेशन है, ये बात ही है, सलूक जिसको कहते हैं, तरीक़ा जिसको कहते हैं, या तरीक़त जिसको कहते हैं। और इसमें आपको पॉवर्टी से, फ़क़्र से, ज़ुहद से, तवक्कुल से और ज़िक्र से गुज़रना पड़ता है। So you can see now this cannot be taken as a stage. And if you are taking it as a stage, that is the first stage, because without a sheikh, you cannot perform anything without this guidance, and you will go astray, and you may fall into the trap of Satan very easily. So this is that second part which we discussed, and the third part is fukr, translated as poverty, but this translation is not a good translation. It needs explanation, because it isn't the ordinary poverty or the ordinary fukr. We know that every true believer, he has to abstain himself from unlawful pleasures. Every believer has to keep himself away from unlawful things. This is for every true believer. However, for the ascetic, for the one who is following the path of the Sufi, for that person, for the ascetic, he also has to abstain from those which are lawful. You see, the true believer has to abstain himself from the unlawful pleasures, but the ascetic has to abstain himself to keep away from even the lawful pleasures. So you see, this is a kind of uh, different, a kind of the idea which cannot be followed by an ordinary believer. It's a special believer who can do this, that he would abstain himself from the lawful pleasure as well. And this faqr, which if translated poverty, would not give that special meaning. Faqr is not that fuqar or bhikari. That is not the meaning. That meaning would be wrong to say. It means that this man is not interested in any worldly goods. Therefore, he has few important worldly goods, and he thinks that these few things are surest means of gaining salvation or najat. That is the that is, if he has less things, then it would be easy to give answers to all these things about all these things in Qiyamah. And it is said about Dawood al-Tay, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, that he had nothing except a mat of rushes on which he would sleep, a brick which he used as a pillow, and a leather vessel in which you kept the drinking water and also water for washing purposes. Um, but this was something which they did intentionally. This fuqar or this poverty is an intentional thing. Even if you have a lot of money, even then you can have this fuqar, which is the kind of thing which your heart has. That money doesn't look important to you. Do not give importance to money. That is also called fuqar. Fuqar doesn't only mean that you don't have anything. If you have a lot of it, for example, Hazrat Usman Ghani radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he had a lot of money, but he was still a fakir and followed fuqar, which is a kind of tasawwuf term. So, a Sufi is the one who goes beyond this poverty, ordinary poverty, because he thinks that the true poverty is not merely the lack of wealth. If you don't have money, this is not the true faqr or the true poverty. The true poverty is actually the lack of desire for wealth. That is, you may have wealth, a lot of it, but you do not have any desire for it. Your heart is not in the love of this money. Your heart is empty of its love, and your hands might have it, but your heart is empty of it. So this is that true focus. This man, the Sufi, is called fakir. Translated as poor man in ordinary language would not be correct. He can also be referred to as darwish, called mendicant in English, and all the mystics, they are proud to be known as fakir. They prefer to call themselves fakir or fuqar. So therefore, to be severed, to be cut off entirely from both the present life and the future life, and to want nothing besides the Lord of the present life and the future life, that is to be truly poor, to be true. So a true fakir in the terminology of tasawwuf is the one who is cut off the present life and the future life, and he wants nothing but God, nothing but Allah. That is the true poverty called faqr, or that is the true fakir. It is not like Bikari, of course, not like that. So this is that thing, poverty. ये जो नेक्स्ट आइटम है पाथ में या सलूक में या तरीक़त में, वो फ़क़र का है, और फ़क़र से मुराद बेकारी नहीं है। ये गरीबी आप कसदन फॉलो करते हैं कि आप ज़्यादा माल के साथ मोहब्बत नहीं करते, आपके पास माल हो भी तो आपका दिल उसमें नहीं होता। और जिस तरह हज़रत उस्मान गनी रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु थे, उनके पास बहुत सारा माल था, लेकिन उनका दिल माल में नहीं था, उनके दिल में अल्लाह ताला मौजूद था, और उनकी मोहब्बत माल की नहीं थी, बल्कि उनकी मोहब्बत अल्लाह ताला के साथ थी। तो इसका मतलब ये भी होता है कि आपके पास दुनियावी चीज़ें बहुत मुख्तसर हों, ज़्यादा से मोहब्बत ना रखें, और यही आपकी निजात का ज़रिया हो कि ये चीज़ें जितनी कम होंगी तो आपको सवाल जवाब कम देना पड़ेगा। कहा ये जाता है कि दाऊद ताई रहमतुल्लाह तआला अलैह, इनके पास सिर्फ एक मैट था, अ, जिसको हम पश्तो में पूजा के कहते हैं, जिस पे सोया जा सकता है। तकिए के लिए उसके पास एक ईंट होती थी और एक चमड़े का बर्तन था जिसमें पीने का पानी और वज़ू बनाने का पानी वगैरह रखते थे। तो सूफ़ी जो है इस पॉवर्टी के अलावा इससे वो आगे जाता है और उसके लिए पॉवर्टी असल में दौलत की कमी नहीं है, बल्कि पॉवर्टी या इस्तिग़ना या फ़क़्र ये है कि उसमें उसके दिल में दौलत की ख्वाहिश ख़त्म हो जाए, तो ये असली फ़कीर होगा। और इसको इंग्लिश में तो पोर मैन कहते हैं, लेकिन फ़क़्र और मेडिकेंट या दरवेश भी इसको कहा जाता है। और ये जितने भी सूफिया कराम हैं, वो फ़ख्र करते हैं इस बात पर कि उनको फ़कीर कहा जाए, फ़ख्र से मुनासबत दी जाए, दरवेश कहा जाए। ये भिखारी अलग चीज़ है, वो नहीं, बल्कि फ़ख्र। तो ये प्रेज़ेंट से भी ताल्लुक़ नहीं रखता, फ्यूचर से भी ताल्लुक़ नहीं रखता, उसका ताल्लुक़ सिर्फ़ अल्लाह ताला के साथ है। तो ये एक नेक्स्ट स्टेज हुआ। Yet another stage is that of nafs, and fortunately, the word is known to you, but there are different explanations of what nafs is. Um, the a moral culture, that is the culture of morality, it is founded on this fact that there is in man an element of evil. That is, every man has an element of evil in it, which is called appetite soul or the lower soul, that is referred to as nafs. This lower soul, this evil self, which is the seat of passion, the seat of lust, it is called nafs. And it can be considered as equivalent to flesh, to body. But all its desires, all its evils, all its passions, its lust, and whatever is allied to it, they are referred to as nafs. This nafs is considered by a Sufi to be an obstacle in the attainment of the union with God. So the one who has nafs in his control can only attain a union with God, otherwise not. And that's why the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, "Thy worst enemy is thy nafs." Yours, the worst of your enemy, is your nafs, because and it is considered more difficult to manage than to manage a war, because in the war you go and fight, but fighting with nafs is jihad with nafs has been called jihad akbar, which is very difficult. And there is a story of one Sufi. He said that uh, one day he saw that a fox came out from his throat, and God caused him to know. God told him that this was his nafs. He trod on it. He trod on this nafs, but when he saw it grew bigger, then he kicked it. With every kick, it will grow bigger. And he said, other things are destroyed by pain and blows. He told nafs that if other things are given blows, or if it is in pain, they are destroyed. Why dost thou increase? Why are you increasing in size, O nafs? And the nafs replied, because I was created perverse. I'm something the opposite. If you make me happy, if you um, try to give me, for example, food and water, I become more thirsty. And if you keep me thirsty, I become satisfied. So you see, it is perverse, it is the opposite. It replied, what is pain to other things is pleasure to me, and their pleasure is my pain. The meaning is this, that if you water the nafs, it will demand more water. If you keep it thirsty, it will be satisfied. It is perverse. It is the opposite. The nafs of Hallaj, Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayhi, was seen running behind him in the shape of a dog. So some people see it in the shape of a dog, some in the shape of a snake, some in the shape of a mouse. This also happens in the dreams too. So this was that next step to control the nafs. ये नेक्स्ट जो टर्म है नफ्स है और इस टर्म के साथ आप वाकिफ ही हैं. मॉरल कल्चर जिसको आप अखलाकियात का कल्चर कह सकते हैं, इसकी बुनियाद इस पर भी है कि हर इंसान के अंदर एक ईविल भी है और ये इसका एपेटाइट सोल कहलाता है, जो इसका थर्ड नफ्स है और ईवल सेल्फ है और सीट ऑफ पैशंस है, लस्ट है, ये नफ्स कहलाता है. इसको आप बॉडी भी कह सकते हैं, फ्लैश भी कह सकते हैं और ये एक रुकावट समझा जाता है अल्लाह ताला के साथ मुलाकात में. और आका सलाम ने भी फरमाया कि आपका सबसे बड़ा दुश्मन ये आपका नफ्स है और ये भी फरमाया कि हम छोटे जिहाद से बड़े जिहाद की तरफ आ गए हैं और वो बड़ा जिहाद है नफ्स के साथ. इसको जिहाद अकबर कहा गया है. नफ्स को मुख्तलिफ सूफी कराम ने मुख्तलिफ शक्लों में देखा है. मसलन एक सूफी रहमतुल्लाह अलैह फरमाते हैं कि मेरी हलक से पाक से निकला, लूमड़ निकला और अल्लाह ताला ने मुझे बताया कि ये तुम्हारा नफ्स है. मैं इसके ऊपर मैंने इसको लातें मारी और तो ये और भी बड़ा हो गया. तो मैंने उससे पूछा कि लोग इस चीज़ से ख़राब होते हैं, आप इस चीज़ से बड़े क्यों हो गए? तो उसने कहा कि मेरी ज़ात उलट है. आप मुझे पानी देंगे तो मैं और मांगूंगा, मेरी प्यास ज़्यादा होगी. आप मुझे प्यासा रखेंगे तो मेरी प्यास बुझ जाएगी. तो नफ्स को जितना आप ज़्यादा सैराब करते हैं वो ज़्यादा प्यासा हो जाता है. So this was that next stage. Yet another stage is referred to as mortification, zuhud. Mortification और zuhud or taqwa, that is the mortification of the nafs. And how is it done? According to the Sufis, it is done with the help of devotion, ibadat, and once you have that mortification done with your nafs, then it leads you to the contemplative life, the life in which you think about the things, it becomes pure. This nafs should be weaned, it should be kept away from those things to which it is accustomed. For example, it is accustomed to passions, so you should resist passions. It is accustomed to pride, so its pride should be broken, and it can be done with the help of suffering and tribulation, and that you should recognize, you should know its impurity, the impurity of its actions, and it should be controlled with the help of fasting, silence, and solitude. And it is said by these Sufis as well that you should die before you die. And the meaning of this is that you should control your nafs. Controlling your nafs is the death of nafs. You should purge the nafs. You should remove from the nafs its attributes, its characteristics. Its characteristics is ignorance, so you should get knowledge. Its characteristic is pride, so you should become humble. Its characteristic is envy. It is uncharitableness, so you should become charitable. And all these things should be removed. That Sufi who has removed, eradicated self-will is referred to as has acquired satisfaction called raza. Um, Raza of Arabic or Urdu, you can say it is. Let me write it here so that you may know it. Raza, this Raza. So, and trust in God is also achieved, which is called tawakkul, if he has controlled his nafs. It is said that once a dervish fell into a river called Tigris and he did not know how to swim. There was a man standing on a bank and he cried, "Shall I tell someone to bring you ashore?" He said, "No." "Then do you wish to be drowned?" And he said, "No." Then the man asked him, "What then do you wish?" The dervish replied, "God's will be done. It is God's will. I do not wish anything. What have I to do with wishing? Wishing is not just something which I have to do. God has to do all the things." So this is that Zohd, mortification, tawakkul, raza, all the things are included in it. लफ्ज़ मॉर्टिफिकेशन जो कि इंग्लिश लफ्ज़ है, इसका नाम जोहद और तकवा है और ये इस्तेमाल किया जाता है नफ्स को कंट्रोल करने के लिए। जब आप ज़्यादा इबादत करते हैं तो ये आपको ले जाता है कंटेम्पलेटिव लाइफ की तरफ, सोच विचार वाली लाइफ, मुराकबे वाली लाइफ की तरफ ये ले जाता है। नफ्स को कंट्रोल करना होता है तमाम बुरे कामों से और उन कामों से जिसके साथ इसकी आशनाई है। मसलन जज्बात, तो जज्बात को रेजिस्ट करें। ख्वाहिशात को, मसलन प्राइड, तकब्बुर, तो इसको तोड़ें और इसको सफरिंग और ट्रिबुलेशन के ज़रिए, बहुत इबादत के ज़रिए और मुजाहिदे के ज़रिए आप इसको तोड़ सकते हैं। इसकी इम्प्योरिटी को, इसकी एक्शंस की इम्प्योरिटी को, गंदगी को ये समझना होता है और मुख्तलिफ तरीके हैं इसको मारने के लिए। रोज़ा रखना है, खामोश रहना है, तन्हा रहना है, ये सारी चीज़ें इसमें आ जाती हैं और ये सारी जब आप करेंगे तो कहा जाता है डाई बिफोर यू डाई, ये आप मौत से पहले मर गए। यानी आपने अपने सेल्फ को, अपने नफ्स को साफ कर दिया है तमाम क्वालिटी से। इसमें जहालत है, तकब्बुर है, हसद है और खैरात ना देना है, सखावत नहीं करनी है, ये सारी चीज़ें ख़त्म करनी है। तो जो शख्स ये कर लेता है और इन चीज़ों से आज़ादी हासिल कर लेता है, उसको कहा जाता है इसने रज़ा का दर्जा हासिल कर लिया है। इसको सेटिस्फेक्शन कहते हैं, इसने तवक्कुल का दर्जा हासिल कर लिया है। कहा जाता है कि एक दरवेश तैर नहीं सकता था, लेकिन वो जब दरिया में गिरा तो बाहर एक शख्स ने उसको कहा, मैं किसी को बुलाता हूँ जिसको तैरना आता है, वो आपको बचा लेगा। तो बुलाऊं? उसने कहा नहीं, मत बुलाओ। तो मैंने कहा फिर आपकी ख्वाहिश है कि आप डूब जाएं? तो उसने कहा नहीं, ये भी नहीं है। तो मैंने कहा फिर आपकी ख्वाहिश क्या है? तो उसने कहा मैं ख्वाहिश कहाँ से रखता हूँ, मेरी ख्वाहिश के साथ क्या काम है, ये अल्लाह ताला की जो मर्जी है वो होकर रहेगी। Yet another is it's a long lecture. I'm sorry for it, but we have to do it because you needed it. The next is the trust in God, also called tawakkul. This trust in God or tawakkul is the extreme form, and this extreme form involves the rejection of personal volition, and it is based on total passivity, just like a corpse in the hands of the washer. Now, let me explain. Tawakkul means that you reject your personal initiatives, your volition, your will, and you hand it over to Allah Ta'ala. You, in this sense, becomes totally passive. Totally passive doesn't mean that you do not do any work. This is not the meaning. The meaning is that you you hand over yourself to God as we have a dead body in the hands of a washer who prepares it for burial. So the dead body, the corpse, cannot do anything. He is moved by the people. So, in the same way, we are in the hands of God, and it is His wish how to move us. But some of the Sufis, the ancient Sufis, of course, they took their name, that is Mutawakkilin, and applied it to matters of everyday life, and they called themselves Mutawakkilin, and they would not seek food, they would not work for hire, and they would not practice any trade, and they would not allow any medicines to be taken, and they quietly committed themselves to God's care, and they believed that God will provide for their wants, just like the birds, and just like the fish, and just like the child in the womb. They are provided by God. However, later on, the later Sufis, they thought that the means of subsistence is compatible with tawakkul. That is, if you have the means of subsistence, there is money and food and all these things, then it is okay. You will still be a mutawakkil. And one of the Prophet's saying is, trust in God and tie the camel's leg. That is, you take your precautions, tie the camel's leg, and then trust in God. That is tawakkul. So the means are also important in this regard. तवक्कुल जो है इंतहा दर्जे का इनकार है कि कोई शख्स ये कहे कि मेरी मर्जी में कुछ भी नहीं है, सब कुछ अल्लाह ताला करता है, मैं एक पैसे हूँ, मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता। बिल्कुल इस तरह जिस तरह एक मुर्दा किसी नहाने वाले के हाथों में होता है, कुछ नहीं कर सकता, उस तरह हम अल्लाह ताला के हाथों में हैं। जो एंशियंट सूफीज़ हैं, उन्होंने इस नाम को भी इस्तेमाल किया और अपने आप को मुतवक्किलीन कहा और एवरीडे लाइफ में इसको अप्लाई किया। मसलन इन्होंने कहा कि हम खुद से तलाश नहीं करेंगे खुराक को, हम खुद से काम नहीं करेंगे, ट्रेड नहीं करेंगे, बीमार हो गए तो हम मेडिसिन नहीं खाएंगे, ये सारा काम अल्लाह ताला का है, वो हमारी हिफाजत करेगा, हमारी इन्हीं ज़रूरियात को पूरा करेगा, जिस तरह परिंदों की ज़रूरियात को पूरा करता है, फिश की ज़रूरत को पूरा करता है, बच्चा जो माँ के पेट में होता है उसकी ज़रूरियात को पूरा। ताहम जो बाद के सूफीज़ हैं, उन्होंने आका अलैहिस्सलाम की इस कौल को फॉलो किया है कि अल्लाह ताला पे तवक्कुल करें और अपने जो ऊँट है उसकी उसको बांध दें और उसके बाद अल्लाह ताला पे तवक्कुल करें। तो ये जो ज़राए हैं सब्सिस्टेंस के वजूद में होने के, ज़िंदा रहने के लिए, ये भी ज़रूरी है और ये उलट नहीं है मुतवक्किल होने के साथ। There is the next second last item, and that is called recollection, also called zikr. Zikr and recollection are the same thing, because when you remember something and when you mention something, when you are thinking about something or someone, that is the recollection of that thing. So when you are doing the zikr of Allah Ta'ala and His different names and attributes, for example, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Allah, Hu, and the other names and the attributes, if you remember Him by these names, it is called zikr and it is called recollection in English, because in the Quran it is said by Allah Ta'ala that remember God often. Remember God often and most of the times. For example, you can say Subhanallah, this is a zikr, glory to Allah. You can say La ilaha illallah, there is no God but Allah. And you can repeat it, and you can bring into your mind Allah Ta'ala, you remember Him, you do His zikr. There are different ways in which this concentration of every faculty is done on the single word or the phrase. The single word, for example, Allah, or the phrase, for example, Subhanallah or La ilaha illallah, you have to concentrate on it. Sometimes it can be silent, it can be spoken, it can be silent. You can do it in your heart as well. This is called zikr qalbi, but we often do it in spoken form, and it can be loud or it can be silent. So we do it in silent way, in whispering. Um, there is a Sufi called Sal ibn Abdullah, and he told one of his disciples to say Allah and Allah the whole day, and he did this uh, for a lot of time. And then after this, he was told by Sahal to do it now during the night too. So he started this in the days and also in the nights. And when he would be asleep, he would his lips would say the same word even in his sleep. Uh, then he was told to be silent and just to recollect them. That is to think about uh, the word Allah. So he started thinking about it. At last, the disciple's whole being was absorbed by the thought of Allah, and one day a lock fell on his head, and the words of Allah and Allah were seen written in the blood that trickled from the wound. ये नेक्स्ट जो है जिक्र की बात है, और जिक्र को आप जानते हैं, अल्लाह ताला की याद को जिक्र कहते हैं, इसको रिकलेक्शन कहते हैं। आप किसी को मेंशन करते हैं, याद करते हैं, सोचते हैं। कुरान मजीद में भी कहा गया है कि अल्लाह ताला को अल्लाह ताला फरमाते हैं कि मुझे ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा याद किया करें। और ये एक लफ्ज़ भी हो सकता है, मसलन अल्लाह, ये कोई फ्रेज़ हो सकता है, सुभान अल्लाह, और ये ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह, ये फ्रेज़ेस हैं, और ये आप बोल सकते हैं कंसंट्रेशन के साथ। आप पूरा ध्यान इन अल्फाज पे या एक लफ्ज़ पे देते हैं, उसको बोलते हैं। स्पोकन भी हो सकता है, साइलेंट भी हो सकता है, विस्परिंग में भी हो सकता है, थोड़ा सा बुलंद आवाज़ में भी हो सकता है। बेहतर यही है कि आप मजलिस में अगर कहीं हैं तो आराम से बोलें, दिल में बोलें, और अगर तनहा है तो थोड़ा सा आवाज़ से भी बोल सकते हैं, नो प्रॉब्लम। कहा यह जाता है कि साद इब्न अब्दुल्ला, इसने अपने मुरीदों में से एक मुरीद को कहा कि आप सारा दिन अल्लाह अल्लाह करते रहे। तो ये बहुत अरसे के लिए इसने किया। फिर ये जब पक्का हो गया तो इसको कहा गया कि आप रात को भी करें। तो ये रात को भी करने लगा, यहाँ तक कि ये जब सोया होता था तो इसकी ज़बान, इसके लिप्स हिलते थे और अल्लाह अल्लाह करते थे। फिर इसको कहा गया कि अब आप साइलेंट हो जाएं और कुछ भी मत कहें, सिर्फ सोचें। और इसके सारे बदन में अल्लाह अल्लाह का लफ्ज़ शामिल हो गया। एक मरतबा इसके सर पे एक लाग गिरा, लकड़ी गिरी, और इससे खून निकला, और कहा जाता है कि इन इन खून के कतरों पे अल्लाह अल्लाह लिखा हुआ था। The next stage or the final in the path is meditation or muraqabah. It is a kind of self-concentration, and it is based on the fact that our Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Worship God as though thou sawest him." You should worship God as if you are looking at him. This is the purest form of worship. For if thou seest him not, yet he sees thee. And if you cannot do this, because you cannot see him, then at least you should think that he is looking at you because he can see you. So this concentration is increased so much that you think you are looking at him. And if you cannot think this much, you can at least think of this thing, that he, Allah, is looking at you. This is called muraqabah, that when you think that Allah Ta'ala is looking at you, He is always watching. This muraqabah, if done always, and if it becomes ripe, then you won't do anything wrong, because you say that God is looking at you, and keeping this in mind throughout is referred to as muraqabah. Nuri says, one of the Sufis, Nuri used to meditate, and his meditation was so intent, so concentrated, that not even his hair would stir. And he said that he learned this from a cat which was observing a mouse hole. As cat is waiting for a mouse to come out, it is silent, it doesn't move. He says, Nuri said he learned it from the cat. And some of the Sufis, for example, Abu Said, he would keep his eyes on his navel. And if a devil finds such a man, this devil is smitten with epilepsy, cannot do anything wrong to such a man. ये आखिरी जो है लंबा लेक्चर हो गया, आई एम सॉरी फॉर दिस अगेन। ये तकरीबन 1 घंटा हो गया है, लेकिन मैं चाहता था इसको ख़त्म करें। तो मुराकबा इस बात का आखिरी मरहला है, ये आसान है लेकिन थोड़ा सा लंबा है। इसमें आप कंसंट्रेट करते हैं और जो बेसिक आइडिया है वो आका अलैहिस्सलाम की का ये हदीस है कि आप अल्लाह ताला की इबादत ऐसे करें गोया आप उसको देख रहे हो। अगर इतना ज़ोर आपका नहीं है तो ये तो आप समझ सकते हैं कि वो आपको देख रहा है। तो जब आप आंखें बंद करें या आंखें खुली भी रखें और ये सोच लगातार करें कि मुझे अल्लाह ताला देख रहा है, तो ये मुराक़बा कहलाता है। और अगर ये पक्का हो जाए और हर वक्त आप यही सोचें, तो फिर कभी भी कोई गलत काम नहीं कर सकेगा, क्योंकि आप कहेंगे वो मुझे देख रहा है। एक सूफी नूरी मुराक़बा ऐसा करते थे कि उनका एक बाल भी नहीं हिलता। उसने कहा था ये मैंने एक बिल्ली से सीखा है, जिस तरह बिल्ली माउस के इंतज़ार में सुराख के करीब बैठी होती है और हिलती नहीं है, तो ये मैंने उससे सीखा है। अबू सईद एक दूसरे सूफी हैं, वो अपनी आंखें अपनी पेट पे लगाते थे। नेवल जो है जहाँ पे आपका एक नुक्ता होता है पेट का, जिसको पश्तो में नून कहते हैं। और कहा यह जाता है कि अगर डेविल शैतान आ जाए ऐसे बंदे के पास, तो शैतान उसका कुछ बिगाड़ नहीं सकता, बल्कि उसको एपिलेप्सी हो जाती है, उसका जिस्म लगता है कि सुन हो गया है, वो इसको कुछ नुकसान नहीं पहुंचा सकता। So these were all the stages. Listen to it carefully, try to learn it. I'll also share the notes with you. This much is enough for now. Thank you and good luck.